Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. You already know who it is and who it ain't. It ain't your boy and it is your man, the blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media, signing black and shining again, asking you to hit the mother cuss word share button because the message is more important than the messenger. So here we go. Check this out, y'all. In the end, I wound up seeing Coming to America. So I want to thank Dr. Professor T. Hasan Johnson for his review. I'm not going to cover the same things he did in his review because that would just be redundant, but I want to thank you for your review because it at least prepared me for certain things that would have really ticked me the uck off. I'll tell y'all what did get to me, though. I'm going to say this straight away. It's propaganda, and the lesson to be learned from that is one thing. Comedy can be enjoyed only if you are going to still seriously and critically analyze the comedy for the propaganda that is included in it. Because in all honesty, it's just comedy. But unfortunately, we have been victim of a particular psychological weapon waged. First, get someone to laugh at something, then use that to desensitize them to it, and then turn around and promote it seriously. And then we've fallen victim to that. We fell victim to that with that TV show In Living Color. In Living Color was like that. And that movie, In Living Color, what they did was they showed us men on film, men on travel, men on take your pick. And of course, it was finger snapping. Hated it. Yeah, guess what wound up happening in the end? First, we laughed. And it was comic talent. It was funny, but then, of course, after we laughed, we became further desensitized to it. And that wasn't the first time. I mean, Flip Wilson had a dress on for certain comedy skits. And then, of course, there were sisters turning around and acting all manly sometimes, but without necessarily changing clothes. So we've dealt with that before. Now, that's the lesson we got to learn. Propaganda is going to come in comedy, and that's when it will be even slicker. That's a lesson. Black people are going to have to stop laughing at two things to make them unprofitable. Stop laughing at rape, whether it's men or women that are getting raped. Stop laughing about that. The second thing is we're going to have to stop laughing at the feminization of black men or the masculinization of black women. Stop laughing at these two. They're not funny anymore. Now, Coming to America, the beginning, the first one, it's a comedy. I get it. Guess what? We have Black Panther now as a movie out. That was not a comedy. It was a movie that had some comic elements in it. Now, Black Panther had some of the demonization of Muslims in Africa with their depiction of Boko Haram. And I say that because there are videos of people that got arrested with Boko Haram that said, wait a minute, I'm not Muslim. I was paid to join. I'm a Christian. I kid you not, there are videos like this. I saw them. There are there are many instances in which Islam has been demonized, specifically in black context. But let me go ahead and help you out with this right quick. For Coming to America, in neither case was it demonized. Actually, Islam was included on the slick and on the sly. But with the emasculation of black men, masculinization of black women, sometimes colorism in there if you want to throw that, if you want to have that, because you see, you take Leslie Jones's character, Mrs. Johnson, she a hoe. She said she was a hoe. But then you also have the comedian Louvel. She's like that too. Then to make matters worse, you have of course, I'm not going to say that the depiction of Lisa McDowell as a good woman is problematic. I'm not going to say that. What is problematic is that when you have first Leslie Jones' character and then you have the character of Lisa McDowell's sister from the first one as being wild and hoish, that is problematic. That certainly is. Now you got all these Zamundan women that have different appearances, and they're all kinds of different ways. But one thing I do like is this. They showed, now other men don't like this, but they showed when those royal bathers woke up Lavelle Johnson his first morning in Zamunda. When they showed that, he said, hold on, wait. And he wouldn't ask his mom, is that normal? It's not okay that he wouldn't ask his mother because she's not in a position to know. It is okay that he didn't just jump at the chance because you know what? Many men are actually not ready to just drop their jaws for women they don't know out the blue. And that's a good thing. There is a natural shyness that even men have. We just don't cultivate it. So by the time we get to be a certain age, we don't think men have the shyness anymore. No tendency towards chastity on the part of males. We don't believe it. So even other academics have looked at this and said that was problematic. What's problematic is that he ran to his mother. That's what was problematic. Not that he didn't jump on it right away and say, okay, y'all come on and bathe me. Because for me, now, there's also fact that when he turned around and left, one of the bathers surfaced and he's like, the privates are clean, madam. She said, one more time. I mean, fit the guck out of here. Man has to do it, right? He must do so. The bathers, the three bathers that came to him, to Lavelle Johnson, they supposed to do it. So I'm aware that runs both ways, but nonetheless, that depiction is somewhat problematic. We need to stop laughing at these things. We need to make them unprofitable as elements of black comedy. I mean, comedy for black people anymore. That's the lesson I get. When we do watch comedies, we still need to have our wits about us and look for propaganda first. Secondly, certain things we need to just quit laughing at. Coming to America, that movie, I'm not really sure why it was there. I don't know why they made the sequel other than a comedy, because we already got Black Panther. And I think maybe this was done as negative propaganda to undo some of what positively resulted from us seeing the depictions that we saw in Black Panther, even though it's all fiction. In the end, it's still all fiction. Zamunda does not exist, but then again, neither does Nextdoria. The hell kind of name is that? One thing I did want to tell you all, though, is this. That's not the only movie I'm going to cover. You can see it in the title. I've talked about two titles I'm going to cover. One of them is this one here, but then the other one, A Night in Miami. That one's deeper. What I learned from that, I realized that watching that movie, you had these four characters, and they each represent elements of the black community and its involvement in the struggle at that time. Sam Cooke represented the bourgeoisie, but also the shrewd businessman. Sam was not as financially restricted as other black folks were. Now, granted, they were all famous. None of them were outright broke per se, except for Malcolm. But then again, that's also because, let's be honest, Malcolm was the most committed. That's what he represented. He represented more sincerity than average. He represented more than I can even describe in real life and the depiction of his character in that movie. There's a certain way we know we can't depict Malcolm because it wouldn't be realistic, and that is insincere. Now, I could go on for hours about what Malcolm's character represents. What I first want you all to understand is that Malcolm saw that he was being followed, watched. So he knew he was hitting a nerve somewhere. Everybody else thought that's crazy talk. Guess what? The paranoia was right. It's not really paranoia when they're out to get you for real. That's the lesson I get from Malcolm. Now, Jim Brown represented the scholar athlete, using his athletic prowess to try to hide his true intelligence while planning ahead, but still understanding that he's still going to be the bad guy because he's a black man with talent and a high profile. Muhammad Ali represented the athlete, not the dumb jock, nor the scholar athlete, but the normal athlete. However, he was intelligent for his age. Remember, he's only 22 around that time. The character was. He represented the athletic talent with a normal intelligence, but that's why he said, talking about, I'm the greatest there's going to ever be. No, God is the greatest there will ever be. And he repented of saying that later on in real life. But in the movie, he's a 22-year-old that's about to announce having become Muslim. Now, Malcolm was by far the deepest. But the conversations that they had that were the most important were four. Four conversations were more important than anything else. The conversation with arguments between Sam Cooke and Malcolm was one. That was part of it. That's one of the most important ones they had. The conversation Malcolm had with the others about him being watched was very important. It was short, but it was very important because now we know he was watched and he was assassinated. That the NOI and government were looking for him to be assassinated. They're both waiting on this. We now know this. So since we understand this at this point, we now know this at this point, let me go ahead and tell y'all the other two conversations that were more important. So you already know that the argument between him and Sam Cooke was important. You can understand that. It's clear as day. We miss the importance of his conversation in which he told them, I'm being watched, I'm being followed. I know I am. I know what they look like. Hell, sometimes I see the same two in different places. And when he later went on to the Middle East, including Egypt, it happened again. He got food poisoning in Egypt, but they pumped his stomach and he was okay afterwards. I think some of those toxins and the stress might have been reasons that, no, I think those bullets would have killed him no matter what. I take that back. But there's another important conversation in there, and that was a conversation that Muhammad Ali had with Sam Cooke in the car after the argument between Sam and Malcolm. And that's when they discussed the importance of both financial empowerment and non-financial empowerment. That was important because back then, black folks ideally knew that the best way to go forward, that what was best for us, was to be able to be ourselves, not lose, that was a good one actually, not lose our morality, and also still be able to make as much and more money than Master's grandkids. That is exactly what the power system is set up for us to never be able to do. Now, we understand they were talking about what exactly we need and what exactly the system will not allow, which later on was proven it would not allow. Because Muhammad Ali Clay was financially busted for taking a stand. Was he not? And I only say Muhammad Ali Clay sometimes because people hear, I'm not saying that his name was really supposed to be Clay. When I say Muhammad Ali Clay, I only say that because I have some listeners that are not African American, and there are many Muhammad Alis outside of him. So I may say Clay only to specify. If you ask me, he is Muhammad Ali, period. But in any case, or champion Muhammad Ali. Now, if you look at us today, what's happened since then? Since that time, today we've become a people who have become morally looser than we used to be, And yet we are not financially empowered any more than before, maybe even less so to a certain extent. Do you see now? The final conversation that was very important was the one had in the hotel room while Jim Brown and Malcolm were in there by themselves, just those two. And Jim said, look, financial empowerment is important. We can't ignore that. Now, I'm going to tell you all this because that's the same subject that the other conversation was about. When you're dealing with an enemy that oppresses you, you can only get out from that oppression two ways. You overrun that enemy, overthrow them, and you subjugate them. You make them do the labor and you enjoy the wealth because that's what they're doing to you. You have to subjugate them and overpower them if you want to flip the script financially to a certain extent, but we can't do that. I mean, if we're honest, we don't have what it takes to overturn white folks in the Americas right now at this point. I mean, there are ways that it could be done, but if I were to say what they are right now, just the ones I know about, before you ever heard it, chances are a drone strike would not only take me out, but take out my wife and probably some neighbors too. So I'm going to focus instead, because you would never hear it anyway. Instead, I'm going to focus on the other option, the solution for us, which is migration. Now, that puts us right back to passports. So you see, them draws ain't the only reason that people are coming against us for talking about passports and leaving and everything. That's not the only reason. If you have a decent amount of money saved up in the States, some countries will they have such a nice exchange rate that it puts you ahead of other people. Sometimes it depends on where you're going with the business is. But I'm just saying this to say that, yeah, you know what? At the end of it, you're going to have to leave. And just like a lot of these anti-passport game promoters and dating coaches are saying, well, you just leaving because you beta over here, so you just gonna go over there and be beta. You just leaving because you a beta and you ain't gonna make it over there anyway, and you might as well stay here. That's because they think that draws are the only reason that a black man will get a passport and fit the guck out. No. It's not just them draws, although that's a good motivator right there. But it's about, even if it's about family, even then, it could be about family and them draws and business. It could be about all of this. If you just want to live relatively unoppressed, that's a reason for you to get a passport and fit the guck out. If they realize that you're doing this so that you can also do better business abroad and find a better woman and start a better family situation, they'll throw those things in and say, well, you're just a loser in business in America, so you have to go where the laws are more lax. That's all it is, nothing else. Lastly, the conversation that they had in the hotel room, Jim Brown and Malcolm, also involved shade, ultimately. And this is a very important question that was asked, but the answer wasn't there. Jim Brown said, hell, man, you see that growing up, sometimes you light skinned, you might get it harder from us than you get it from white folk. So the question is, are you red Negroes so militant to prove something to white folk or to prove something to us? Excellent question. Why was that not answered? It's complex. The one thing missing from the movie was the answer to that. And if they had asked me, is there anything that needs to be added? I would have said, this question must be answered. And I'll help you answer it if you want. See, as I've said before, red Negroes, as they would have been referred to back then, light-skinned folk, aren't necessarily so militant because we're looking to prove something to black people or we're looking for acceptance from our people. Not as adults. As kids, it could go either way. It depends on the kid, what they've been through, what they're thinking, and they may not even be fully aware of it. But as adults, fit the guck out of my face with that sure bit. You just trying to be accepted. I can't prove to niggas that I'm black. And I'm saying that word for a reason. I can't prove that. If you were NI99A, if you were Nijif, I can't convince you that I'm black and you don't want to believe it. It's easy for me to actually get a black person to say, oh, no. Black man is black. It's easy. All I got to do is deny being black and then they'll start saying I'm black. Then I could capitulate to what they're saying. That's easy. To get black people to say that I'm black, all I got to do is deny it. Then they'll say, oh, no, with them lips, that nose, no, man, you trying to pass or something like that. That's what they'll wind up saying. So the question should have been asked and then answered with an adult response. Malcolm should have looked at him and said, look, all these folks you named, you should understand we were, a long time ago, we were too young to think that we were ever going to prove anything to us. We know we're going to be argued with no matter what we say. You're going to be argued with no matter what you say. We're divisive like that. Ain't no proof nothing to us. No. The reason why we militant is because we get to hear them say some more things. They try to split us up from you. They come to us with offers like this, or they try to convince us that we're different. That's the reason why we know certain things about them you may not know. But you, Jim Brown, I think you do know. Now that would have been more powerful than anything, because then Jim would have said, I saw that when I went back to St. Simon's Island. All this praising me and everything else. And then next thing, he said, we don't let niggers in the house. You see, Malcolm could have related. He could have told Jim, and Jim would have been like, oh, yeah, that is true. I've seen it with regard to something else. It just wasn't shade. Do you see now what we're talking about? That should have been answered. Prove something to us. There's no way I can prove anything to us. Malcolm should have said, ain't no way I can prove anything else. I already know that. I knew that by the time I was 15. There's nothing to prove. That's not even a question. But the thing is that the only thing we really wish we could prove to other black folk is how racist the racists really are and how trained they are, and even how brainwashed other sectors of the world that aren't white or black are trained to be by white folk. You can take Tunisia. At the United States Embassy in Tunisia, they tell the ones to whom they give the visas to go to the U.S. come back for an appointment. They go to an appointment, they get some kind of orientation, and they're told stay away from black neighborhoods, they're dangerous. That's what happens at the U.S. Embassy in Tunisia. I know a Tunisian citizen told me this, living in Atlanta. She said this to me. And mind you, they already have some of that brainwashing themselves, because when I told her that Musa, alayhi salam, that means Moses for those who aren't familiar with any Arabic at all. When I told her that Musa alayhi salam was black, I don't have to tell you what she said about that. No, he's not. How? Why not? Look at the geography of the place. She said, well, they enslaved black people in Egypt at that time. How could God send a slave to the Pharaoh? And I was like, you dummy. Of course they enslaved black people at the time. There were no white folks there. They weren't really around in large numbers like that at that point. I'm not saying they didn't exist, but they weren't going to be in large numbers in Egypt. So the Pharaoh was also black. She thought that there was some kind of racialized slavery even way back then, as if it's just some natural human instinct. That's the brainwashing. Even non-blacks who are Muslim have been conditioned to see their history or their religion through this racialized lens. And this is why I have said that some of them are outright apostate hypocrites. We know this, but we also know when it's not true. We know which groups of people are not really anti-black and which ones are anti-black and which ones are subconsciously so, but not necessarily consciously, like the Arabs. They're not consciously anti-black. They're subconsciously that way. Now, the Indians and the Pakistanis, no, they're pretty much consciously anti-black. They don't hide it. They don't see a reason to. Like, no, nigga, you darker than me. Get away. Your hair's nappier than mine, too. And where'd you get that big old wide nose from? Hell, if my baby came out looking like you, I'd leave him in the dumpster. It's more, we know who's who. And that's the reason why it is that we could be some of the most militant. Because I'm going to tell y'all straight like this. I've already said it. Right now, I'm pro-black male. Because when you throw in the gynocracy, not the black woman, I said when you throw in the gynocracy of the Western black nations, the community ain't worth being for. It ain't worth this kind of militancy. Ain't been and ain't going to be anytime soon. But Malcolm knew and understood. He didn't necessarily seek acceptance in white society per se. He just was a kid who had whose parents, his dad was dead and his mother was not able to take care of him. He was just looking to get along like normal, like a kid would. And he saw at a young age, that's not going to happen. But he also remembered that his dad went easiest on him versus the other siblings. And he knew at a young age, he said in his autobiography, he figured at a young age that was a self-hatred that was taught. And who would have taught that to us? See, if you come out in the middle of the spectrum, you don't have a reason to think that you got whooped for being too pale or too dark. You don't have a reason to think that you were treated better or worse in any way because you were too pale or too dark. You don't have that. If you come up abundantly melanated and they're hard on you, it can take years before you realize that they're going easier on somebody that's pale, because ain't a whole lot of us that pale. It's rare, it exists, but it's not that common. If you are pale, you are outnumbered by folks that are not. And you see that in the instances in which you are treated better, it's usually by some of your own, the elder, and you see early on the examples of this self-hatred, and then you start to wonder who the hell taught them this. That's why it is. I saw this coming up mostly with older adults. I didn't see this so much with kids, but I saw with sometimes elders. Oh, you got that good hair. Thank you. Then I get older and I'll be like, wait a minute, so what is bad hair? Oh, we got bad hair, baby. We got nigger hair. Okay, what makes that bad? It's natural. I mean, hell, mine is strange, so what makes it bad? What makes your hair bad? Oh, baby, you got hair like them white folks. So wait a minute. So you think that they're somehow better than us? Who taught you to hate yourself? Because see, as a kid, you know it's not natural to hate yourself. And that's why it is that sometimes the red ones can be the most militant. We already know they ain't worth nothing to integrate. We know that they're burning house. We know they're worthless. Malcolm even made mention of this in his autobiography, in which he said that oftentimes black folks who did pass it, he said bourgeoisie black folks got sick and tired of white folks. And black folks who passed as white were the first ones to get tired of white folks. He made mention of this. And I can tell you, as somebody who could pass as non-black, but not necessarily as white, that is very, very, very true. You see how trashy they can be. And you also see how good they can be. But you see how trashy they can be at a young age. And even the good ones don't necessarily spot how trashy they can be. You'll see that coming up. Because you'll know when you're young that you don't talk back and mean and disrespectfully to adults. You'll know that. But then you'll see that they don't have a problem with cussing out their mom sometimes. Maybe not in elementary, but at some point, like in elementary, everything's why. A certain way they talk to their parents, you wouldn't talk to adults. And sometimes it's not wrong, but most of the time it is. And then you get older, they get older, they're cussing their mom out. And you're like, man, your mom's up here working 2 and 3 jobs. Your dad's doing all of this. They're working and taking care of you, and you treat them like this. What the F, man? And when you start hanging around some of them wiggers, as they call them, you don't even have to be pale. You hang around some of them wiggers and you hear them cuss their mom out or cuss their dad out. And you might even ask them, why do you do this? Mind you, they act like us. They trying to play b-ball like us, rap like us, cat backwards like us, yo, 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 yo. But they'll cuss their mothers out just like another white kid would. And why? Sometimes they'll even tell you because she's white. That means they will tell you, regardless of your shade, that they see something wrong with their people. Now, I've always told you that so-called, that CAWB, C-A-W-B, you know, that Kool-Aid white boy. I think I can say it, cool-ass white boy. Even they will have biases like against Latin Americans or against Arabs or something like that. And it won't be because of anything actually bad about them. They'll come up with some stereotypes or something. So that shows they still got some of that racism in them. They just see you as domesticated. Oh, they hate wild horses, but they love a farm horse, as an example. Oh, they hate sheepdogs. I mean, they love sheepdogs, but they hate wolves. You're just the domestic version, that's all. Because you're American. So you'll still see that even with them. You could see that regardless of shade, but there are times when they drop their guard. It's not that they less racist with us or even love us more per se. They're just times they drop their guard or they make the attempt to divide us. And this is why you will see that question should have been answered. That was missing from A Night in Miami. I'm sorry that it was, because that would have been very important for us to see. But I've said this before. You ain't gonna find you ain't gonna find necessarily the most militant of us to be the most abundantly melanated at a young age, except on rare occasions. Rarely. What happened between Marcus Garvey and W.E.B. Du Bois before they reconciled was very, very rare. It's very stereotypical. W.B. Du Bois was a tragic mulatto who sought to win the acceptance of his father's people, and he couldn't win it, so then he became Pan-Africanist. Well, that's stereotypical, but that's not actually what happens in many cases. Garvey learned from a young age he wasn't going to get that acceptance either back in Jamaica. Then he learned again that the British High Commission in Panama was not going to defend black British subjects. He learned that. No. Both of them learned about the acceptance that was not forthcoming. But in many cases, you'll find that the red ones, so to speak, start off militant at an earlier age. More convinced of it. And again, a lot of Malcolm's militancy had a lot to do with Garvey too, because Malcolm had been introduced to militancy from somebody that was coal-black, and that was his father. And his father was actually preaching on behalf of Marcus Garvey before he was killed. Oh yeah, don't get it twisted. So this idea that it's always the red ones that are the most militant ain't even true that it's always like that. It's just that we have more opportunity to become that way early on, because we will find that it ain't always just white folk that drop their guard. A lot of times they may not do it if they know you're black. They may not necessarily drop their guard too much. They will go to the divisive tactics early on because they're not dropping their guard. But then you will find that other non-whites are trained and brainwashed and taught to see it the same way. That's when you find out. You find out when somebody else is not quite African American comes to you and mistakes you for one of their people. And you tell them you black, and no, black people do this, that, and the other. Oh, and you believe that dumb shit? Okay. That's when you find it out. And I wish that question had been answered. Now, I couldn't think of a quick one-line answer, but I'm sure that the movie writers could have. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was a deleted scene. Anyway, that being said, I think I've gone through enough, and I appreciate you all listening. Black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum. Black heterosexual non-select male power, and black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day.